Entrepreneurship is a mindset. You don't have to start a company to be an entrepreneur. And if you were to look at the Spanish equivalent, like emprender, to like undertake, it is someone who makes something happen. And you can innovate within a company that is not your own, within an organization that is not your own, or you can create a company. So it's someone who makes things happen at the end of the day.
Do something you're very passionate about, and don't try to chase what is kind of the hot passion of the day.
I think that's a big mistake that a lot of newcomers do, is that they focus on how can my passion pay me? And I think that's a terrible place to start. If the reason why you're doing anything creative is to make a living, then you're doing it wrong.
You ask yourself, you sit on the bed and say, okay, man, I'm ready to learn something. Like what's one thing I'm doing wrong that I know I'm doing wrong, that I could fix, that I would fix? You meditate on that, you'll get an answer. And it won't be one you want, but it'll be the necessary one.
One of the big things that all startups do is they lie to themselves over and over and over. You've got to be very careful as an entrepreneur to be brutally honest with yourself. And those are some of the things that you'll hear from me as a mentor, that know what you know what you don't know, but you've got to know your business better than anybody.
The number one thing I would tell every single person watching this, pay very close attention to who's giving you the advice. My guess was the friends that were giving you that advice were the ones that gave up on their ambition and offense at that point of their life, and subconscious bias. It's not like they're bad people. The misery loves company thing is not evil, it's subconscious. When I tell you something about the New York Jets, that's a good idea to listen to me. When I tell you something about radishes, bad idea. Pay the attention to who's giving you the advice. Who's giving the advice?
My advice is not that everybody should become an entrepreneur. And so you should not start a business for the sake of starting a business. You should start a business because there's a problem nobody else is solving. I think that's always the way to think of what entrepreneurs are at their best.
Number one advice I always give is to solve a problem. So many people, when they found a company just to found a company, or they're like, I've got an idea. Ideas are not companies, ideas are not product. So I always say, make sure you're actually solving a problem.
One of the things I advise entrepreneurs to do is when you have an idea, a classic entrepreneurial impulse is to hold the idea close to you and not go tell people because, the idea is so special. Right. That's almost always a mistake. It's a mistake because your actual real competitive advantage is not that you have this idea that you have locked away in your closet, which may or may not be accurate and you have no idea which it is. Your actual competitive advantage is if you're assembling the intelligence around, does this idea work? What is the right teams? What is the right learnings? And we're essentially in motion.
The hardest thing to do is start. You have all these ideas and everyone has an idea, but it's really about executing the idea and building the idea and attracting other people to help you work on the idea. That is the biggest challenge. But the way to begin is to get the idea out of your head, draw it out, talk about it, program it if you're a programmer, or make it if you're building something.
What happened is he was an incredibly charismatic guy that didn't have a good market product fit vision, and we built an incredibly elaborate product, and we ultimately sold one copy of it to one customer and they never installed it. So, it's a funny thing about leadership. You can be very personally compelling and high integrity, that's great, but you also got to lead people in the right direction, not into the Box Canyon.
Your vision, your just cause, can withstand cultural, political, or technological change. Which means when I hear people say, to be the best technology, well, that's not going to sustain through technological change. Think about how many businesses went like this simply because the internet was invented, right? So it has to, your cause has to be written in terms that is durable, that is resilient through technological, political, and cultural change.
The most important thing is pick a great co-founder. And a co-founder is someone who's going to have very high intelligence, very high energy, and very high integrity. The intelligence is a given. These people should be very smart. Hopefully they make you feel dumb, or they're not smart enough. They should be extremely hardworking. A founder is someone who never has to be motivated. You should not have to be telling them to do their job. And the integrity piece is important because if you get the other two and you don't get the third, then you've got a smart, hardworking crook who's going to cheat you.
If you do it alone and you don't have relationships and you do something to fill something in you, it's not going to fully do that. But if you do it because you love it, and you get to do it with people you love, and you can do it out of a sense of gratitude and giving to other people, that you start something for love. You're the customer. You talk to the customers. And at some point, the company grows. And you start with the head and the heart. You're like putting your love into it. You're intuitive. No startup is data-oriented because there is no data. If you have an idea, there is no data. So you go off your intuition. You do something because you believe in it. And then at some point you get so big, the company gets financialized. There's a lot more data. And you start making decisions with the heart and now with the head and one side of your head. And what you get is this sense of love and connection. By giving something, and by giving love, you kind of get it back in return.
You have to decide as a company, you have to decide as a engineering team or as an innovator to say, you know what, I don't need to change the world overnight. I'm going to change the world over the next 50 years. I don't need to build a killer product overnight. I just need to build a winning product. And the goal of winning is so that you can play again. It's just like pinball. Okay? If you could just play well enough to get another game, you could be there for a long time.
As you sort of reach each of these new milestones, you're like, okay, the goalposts move back, and so your ambitions are much broader over time, and this is kind of, all this doesn't happen overnight. So when you kind of look at, I talked at the beginning of how kind of daunting everything seemed, because there's like the little sort of corner of stuff that you know and this world of stuff that you don't. You know, often that can be enough of a barrier to stop people from even getting started. So just realize that you have to be systematic about how you learn all these things, but you know, this all happens one day at a time.
Imagine big things, but always start very small as you can get. Don't get caught up with your imagination to jump into it right away. Your first tiny step will make this all happen.
I think what you really want is to find the smallest possible cohesive subset of your market, the most narrow, smallest market you can find, with users that desperately need what you're doing, and go after that first.
The risk of launching early is not as great as the risk of launching late. It's not like there's only risk on one side, right? There's a risk of launching late too. It didn't become as sticky as minimum viable product because it describes what the minimum viable product has. It's a quantum of utility. Launch as soon as you have a quantum of utility, which means as soon as there's one person in the world who is glad that you launched because now they can do something that they couldn't do. If you have something that if you launched it, no one would be happy, then you're not ready to launch, right? As soon as there's at least somebody out there who would say, oh, here's this thing I can use because I can do X and before that I couldn't do it, then you should launch. As soon as you have a quantum of utility.
The way through the challenge is to get still and ask yourself, what is the next right move? Not think about, oh, I got all of this stuff. What is the next right move? And then from that space, make the next right move. And the next right move, and not to be overwhelmed by it because you know your life is bigger than that one moment. You know you're not defined by what somebody says is a failure for you, because failure is just there to point you in a different direction.
I think like focus is one of the most important things, because like as a startup, it's actually, I think, your most powerful weapon, right? Like the reason that you're able to take on like these big companies or whatever is because they're doing 1,000 different things, right? And so the only way you can win is if you take everything you have and you focus it at one point, right? Because you are underpowered in every way versus these other companies. So the one thing you do have that they don't have is you can be like absolutely 100% focused on the thing that you're doing.
Put your staff first, your customers second, and your shareholders third. Effectively, in the end, the shareholders do well, the customers do better, and your staff are happy.
Too much of the time sometimes is focused on the customer and not on the back side of the business. You have to invest ahead of the growth curve. And that means you've got to hire people who have the skill base and experience beyond the size of the business. And you have to invest in the infrastructure in order to keep the trains on time and also to anticipate the growth of the company.
You know, a lot of people go into business and they're looking to never make any mistakes. That's not the way to succeed. You have to be willing to try things, experiment, ask a lot of questions. Don't be stuck on any one position, and you know, most importantly, to listen and look for breakthroughs and, you know, ideas that haven't been out there.
I generally tell founders, don't worry about runway, worry about lift. And like, I actually like the metaphor, because if you think about lift in like a plane context, a company's only valuable if you achieve lift. Like, runway is a tactic for achieving lift, and you may need to extend the runway so that you have more time to get lift. But unless you're actually achieving lift with that extra time, it doesn't help you. You haven't achieved anything. And so I will often advise founders to let like sort of your fuel tank go very low, like down to almost zero. If you really feel like you're approaching lift, don't worry about whether you have 1, 2, 3, 5 months of runway.
Do not go around telling people, I have a great idea, now give me money. That never works. It's rather you should say, this is a space where there's a huge market, I'm really knowledgeable, passionate about it, here are the kinds of things that I could do, here's the great person that I have doing it with me, and here's the minimum viable product that we have built that will show that we can, we can test in the marketplace. So basically, you do want to build something. Thanks to all the leverage that I talked about, you can actually build and deploy something before you go and raise money, especially if you have good coders on your team. You can iterate it to the point where you get what Andreessen calls product market fit, where your product matches up to what the market needs. And then you go and you raise money from people you trust, and you use that money to scale.
If you're entering anything where there's an existing marketplace against large entrenched competitors, then your product or service needs to be much better than theirs. It can't be a little bit better, because then you put yourself in the shoes of the consumer and they say, why would you buy it as a consumer? You're always going to buy the trusted brand unless there's a big difference.
It's one of the magical things you can deliver as a startup, is you can talk to a passionate user and then you can build what they want, and then you can say, here it is. And they will fall in love with you, even if those features are relatively mundane, because let's be clear, Twitch today, chat on the right, video on the left, the same product. What was great about this process was by talking to them, they realized that we were on their side. We realized they were building something for them, so they told their friends. That was the major change.
Sort of a fast-growing startup is that product innovation slows down. And you're like, why would that be? I mean, you know, you guys launched with whatever, 10 people, now we're 330 people. How could it possibly slow down? Right. The product actually advances surprisingly slowly. I think the flip side of it is that when you come out of it, if you do it well, then it's like stand back, right? Where it can be so fast. And I think Facebook is actually a good example of a company that sort of went through the slow and then really sped up.
Pain is growth. And what he's referring to is like, you know, if you're pushing yourself, you're pushing a new weight, you're gonna, especially when you go deep in the reps, it's gonna start hurting. You're gonna feel a burning. And that burning sensation is something to embrace, because that is where growth happens. That's literally where your muscles are tearing and you're getting stronger.
If you're an entrepreneur and you find yourself afraid of something, sack up, okay, and start hustling. Hustling is the antidote to fear. Go create your success.
For anyone who's had the experience of actually building a company, you know that you go through some really hard things along the way. And I think part of what gets you through that is believing in what you're doing and knowing that what you're doing is really delivering a lot of value for people. And that's, I think, how the best companies end up getting made.
Your work is going to fill a large part of your life, and the only way to be truly satisfied is to do what you believe is great work. And the only way to do great work is to love what you do. If you haven't found it yet, keep looking and don't settle.